Welcome, everyone. How are you all keeping? I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully you will see my presentation and the team can let me know if there's any problem for you seeing it. Let's see. Hopefully it's live. Okay, so I welcome everybody. So wonderful to see you all today. I see faces popping up, and I know some friends will be taking part as well. This is going to be a session where I will share some insights, share some of my thinking about what's going on in this world, how we manage generative AI in our roles as mentors and coaches, and some of the great resources that are available to you to leverage to understand really in more depth of what's happening. And there will be opportunities for you to ask questions, give your comments, feedback, so on, throughout the stage. So there will be a couple of different times where I will stop. Feel free to post some questions into the chat or QA area so that there's a team that will be keeping an eye on that for us as well. And we will get to as many as we can throughout this session. So looking forward to sharing with you more about this particular topic. So about me, just to give you some insights as to my own background. I have been a mentor for many years throughout my career, and more recently have become a certified coach from the INSEAD school. I have been working in the business environment for many years since getting my MBA at the Wharton School in Pennsylvania. As you may guess, as you're listening to me now from my accent, I am Irish, but I have worked in different parts of Europe, and starting off in the UK, moved to the US for many years, and now I'm currently based in Paris, France. So I have had roles as a financial services banker, investment banker, researcher, consultant, trainer, and more recently as coach. So I'm bringing all of that to bear in our discussion today. So that's a little bit about myself. And currently I am the Thought Leadership and Research Principal Director at Accenture Research, based out of the Paris office. So why did I look at this topic? And I must admit, when I was looking at the focus of today's conference, around uncertainty, the fact that it is the National Mentoring Day, I thought that was a really exciting opportunity to dive in here and talk about something that's really impacting us all, and will significantly impact jobs going forward for many years to come. But there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, and indeed this is the time to be aware. And I wanted to describe a little bit of some of the context in which we're operating before a deep dive into the impact of Gen AI for us. So some of the questions you may be asking, how do you mentor somebody whose role or even industry is undergoing radical transformation? How can the new technologies transform the way you consider the roles in your workplace, or even your role as a mentor? So these are some of the things that you may be thinking of, or, how can you encourage somebody if you're a mentor or a coach and you see somebody struggling? How can you encourage them to embrace that change? And then finally, what transitions do you feel must you make in a world with generative AI? The world's new technology innovation is really making a significant difference for us going forward. So we have super opportunities, but also challenges ahead of us. So that's something we need to bear in mind as we look at. So these are some of the things that I will be addressing in this session, and we'll also look forward to your own thoughts as you listen to what I'm sharing with you today. So one of the things I find fascinating is that the world is constantly changing, and depending on who you speak to and where they are in their careers or their lifespan, what they deem to be change is quite different. Obviously, children born in the last so many years will take the internet for granted, whereas for those of us who saw it come on board and so on, you may even remember that there was a time when companies were asking, do I need a website? And in fact, so I thought it would be useful, just to put some context here, to share some of the projects that I've been involved in over the past so many years. that focused on change. And some of the questions seem, unusual today. Of course you need a website, but those are genuine questions that companies are asking and feeling, well, my clients aren't interested in something like that. That's for a smaller bit player, all technology. Mine like to talk to a relationship manager, and so on. And indeed, now it's become both. Yes, you must have that website, and that human interaction is also plays a significant role. So there's two elements there. The other area that I focused on, so that was my first, huge insight to the fact that some people hadn't yet embraced the understanding that technology will keep changing and will keep changing how we work. The next big project that I focused on was looking at digital readiness. So now we had a time period where many companies, well, most companies had a website, described their products on the website, but they didn't necessarily describe the full range of products. They didn't make it simple for clients or customers to opt in, to buy, to get the service that they were looking for. They still required the individual to, in the case of banking, to walk into the branch and sign up. Some of the rules may be regulatory based. So in other words, they had to have physical paper with the signature on it, although that's been changing over time. And some were simply that the companies didn't think it was necessary. They hadn't yet developed these tools and so on, as we've seen. And indeed, that's the one thing that held certain companies back during the pandemic, when we were all forced to work from home, to socially distance, and those companies that were ready, that had invested in the technology to make it possible to fully serve their customers remotely and digitally, they were the ones that really soared and thrived throughout that period, in a very, very difficult time and context for us all. And that brings me to the next area of study that I've been looking at, which is around 360 value. And this is something that we talk about a lot within my company, Accenture, which is a huge global company of 700,000 plus people around the world globally. But one of the things that we're very keen on talking about is 360 value, which means that financials are not sufficient. We need more. We need to think about sustainability. We need to think about our talent. We need to think about the customer experience. So there's a lot of different things that companies need to deliver upon. And those all come into mind, that are things that increasingly, since the pandemic, people are much more aware of these things. The importance of having work-life balance has become even more important as people realize how precious life is. So these are some of the things that we have spent a considerable amount of time thinking about, working on, and working very closely with clients on. And then more recently, looking at reinvention, the idea that there is a new performance frontier in every industry. And that's where we should be looking at as company leaders and so on, as to what's the next level, where to go to. And then finally, Gen AI has revolutionized many industries and will do as we go forward. So what do you look out for, and so on? The reason I'm sharing these insights and parts of my own experience is to highlight what's changing in the business world. What's changing for us as individuals, leaders, so on, in this world, that we need to bear in mind, what we need to be aware of as we look at, how can we be more effective? So if you're mentoring somebody who's working and living in this space and trying to perform at their best, they need to be aware of the implications of these changes on their business, the implications on their roles, on their tasks that they're doing. And all this plays a role into their ultimate success and their ability to achieve their goals. So as a mentor, you can open their eyes to what is out there, the changes that are happening. In some cases, some people are not aware, like the example I gave earlier around, do we need a website? Well, it's coming. So these are some of the things that the technology is making possible. And so we need to look at ways to embrace this going forward. And your role as a mentor allows you to open up the ideas here and to allow the individual to understand what's happening in their market and how it might impact their world. In addition, as a coach, of course, you can start to explore what might be the elements that might be holding people back. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more going forward. But before we go into more detail of your role as a mentor or a coach, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the forces that are impacting our world. And some of this will seem obvious to you as you look down this list. We've seen in the banking, financial services area, what we refer to it as tightening financial conditions. That's where we've seen inflation skyrocket. And central banks come in and say, okay, let's raise the interest rates to stop the inflation, to slow it down, bring it down to a reasonable level. And that has happened over the last year or so. So going forward, we expect that will be fairly straightforward, not dramatically. Hopefully, we won't see too many more increases in interest rates. But of course, that has brought on uncertainty, that all that volatility has brought on uncertainty for companies. What do I do next? How do I get my funding? It's now more expensive than it used to be. Can I commit to making these new investments? We had during the pandemic concerns over supply chain bottlenecks. We still hear about that from time to time, but luckily those types of trends are diminishing. But it's worth bearing in mind that, of course, if the supply chains are impacted, then the knock-on businesses are impacted as well. So that also it means that our people, our leaders that we're guiding and advising, need to bear these, think about these things, think about the potential impact on their businesses. We've recently seen significant increases in energy prices. And that is something that may continue or hopefully will stabilize, but it's certainly something we have had to watch out for. And thankfully, the global pandemic that we've seen with COVID-19, thanks to all the super incredibly fast technology advances, bringing to us vaccines and being able to deliver those in incredible speed around the world, has meant that the impact of the pandemic going forward is significantly diminished, and hopefully we'll have better treatments and so on for those who do catch the severe forms of this disease. Unfortunately, with regards to geopolitical conflict, that clearly has a significant impact for us. We have seen in European markets, we've seen Ukraine and Russia fighting it out as that conflict continues. More recently, we've seen horrible events happening in Israel and Gaza. That uncertainty puts certainly a dampener and changes the mood of us all as we're watching news items that one after another talk about horrific things happening around the world. Can also impact our ability to think positively, to think about the opportunities, to think about what can we do to make a difference, to help, to save people and so on. So that's unfortunately has been quite high in the past year in terms of the impact, and ongoing. We can anticipate, certainly in our roles as coaches, that we will be guiding individuals and helping them think through, okay, what can I do next in spite of these horrible events happening, and hopefully those events will get resolved soon enough. And the one positive area that to wrap up with is a mixed bag in the sense of climate change and sustainability. We've seen incredible high temperatures, significant events happening around the world, leading to fires and so on, that have been quite amazing to see, and unfortunately have proven that the scientists have been proven to be true around their predictions of what the impact of climate change might bring. This is something that is driving many companies and individuals alike to think, how can I be more sustainable? How can I think about ESG items as I do my own work, and what role can I play to make a difference, to be more sustainable and so on. So I do expect that in terms of change, that will be one that we will see a lot more of in the future. And the reason I'm bringing all these to your attention is, of course, talking about the change that is happening around us, and so putting the context of our mentoring within that change and how we can go about it. The next thing I'd like to share with you is we started to focus more on the change and the positive change that are happening with technology. there are three great reports that I'd like to share with you that we have published at Accenture. The first one is our Tech Vision for 2023, was published earlier this year. And it talks about the 4 different trends that have been key and we see going forward. Our tech vision really looks forward and describes what's going to impact businesses over the coming years, and what do companies need to be aware of today to make a difference, to be positioned effectively to operate at their best in the future. So an emphasis around digital identity, that we all have a digital and a physical life, and how do you merge those two? Who's in charge of the data? What's, how do we ensure data transparency? What even all of us on this call right now are sharing information with each other as we are here today. I will delve in more detail around the generalizing AI, the focus of AI in our trends, and how this is going to become pervasive throughout everything we do, whether we were fully aware of it or not. It's coming. And then what are the next frontiers of technology advances that are coming? You may have heard of quantum computing and so on. These are all things that are coming our way. The second piece that I would like to share with you about as well is the new era of generative AI for everyone. And the idea there is looking more closely at what's happening in Gen AI, and how it is indeed going to impact us all in terms of us, businesses themselves, or the individuals, us as mentors, or in the role of coach, or as individual being coached or mentored, and what you can do to embrace this new era, and recognize that we're only at the early stages even now of what the future potential might look like. So that is something to bear in mind. And then the final piece I'd like to share with you also, and by the way, there is an accompanying paper that provides you the links to all of these reports, and there's a lot more detail in those reports, of course, than I can share with you today. So I do invite you to go there. But the last piece that I would like to share with you is one that we've published very recently, which is around life trends for 2024. And we've identified 5 trends, and I will leave it to you to look at the detail. But I do enjoy the terminology of the first one, which is around where's the love, which is what we as consumers have been noticing, that as companies have been looking to cut costs, there is less focus on customer service. There, if you look at your bag of potato chips or something like that, you'll find there's less product inside the bag than there used to be. So companies are cutting back in different ways, and customers are starting to notice. So that is one of the things that we are seeing at the consumer level. And then the next one, which I'll be talking about in a little bit more detail, is that interface shift, which is where the Gen AI exposure comes in. That with this, up till now, we've been thinking about technology as separate from us as individuals. And you put in your search into one of the search engines, you get something mechanical back. You have to phrase it in a certain way so that the machine would understand you. Now, with the likes of generative AI, you could speak the way you would normally do. You can either type it out, or you can actually speak to the machine, and it will respond in a conversational style that really stands out. So that's how the interface between humans and technology and so on is changing over time. So this is one of the things that's really standing out for us all as we're looking across the board, and in terms of the types of changes that are happening around us that will be impacting our business and our working lives going forward. So let me just stop for a moment there and see if there's any comments, reactions, questions to what I've shared with you so far. As I said, my goal was to share some about the context that we're all living in before going into more depth of what this means, and particularly what Gen AI means for us all. Any comments or questions? I don't know if I can see the chat box. No, I can't see the chat box. So maybe Carolina, if you can let me know if there are any comments or questions, or feel free to add any into the into the chat box. Okay, well, if anyone would like to ask a question, feel free to unmute or to, oh, I see a raised hand. Mick, can you unmute? Are you able to? Oh, yeah, I think you're unmuted now. You try?
now I'm muted.
There you are.
I was actually going to say that, yeah, I can't unmute myself, so
no worries.
Can't do that. And I don't have any questions right now, but I'm interested in reading these articles later, these reports later, because I think there should be some good stuff in there for use cases. So yeah, just
super. There's great information there, what I'm trying to do is make you aware of what's out there, and obviously there's a lot more you can read up on, but these are the snapshots of the most relevant reports for our purposes today that I thought that we've developed at Accenture, and I really wanted to share them with you and give you some insights there. I think you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question or make a comment, and then the team will unmute you to make that possible. So anyone else have a comment or question? I see Maria Miranda. Let's see. Are you able to unmute?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Yara. In your research, what has been the humanistic impact in this fast changing digital world? Not on the current generation that, are born and basically have an iPad in their hand, but the generation that was not, that had to adapt to the changing digital world. Any insights from a research perspective on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and indeed a point that immediately comes to mind as a lovely picture. I can imagine it in my head of grandparents with their grandchild looking at an iPad, or conversing directly as we are now through Zoom, and it's fascinating to see how that older generation, who certainly did not grow up with any of this technology, have also embraced it, because it facilitates a communication, a contact with the people that are important to them. And I think that's the thing that we need to all remember at the end of the day. Technology can be wonderful, can be very frustrating, provides us opportunities and challenges. And at the end of the day, it should be here to serve us as humans. And that's the thing that really comes out in our research, and that report on life trends in particular focuses on what is the human looking for, what do we need as individuals, and what how, to what extent is the technology helping solve that, and how can we make that more effective? So the research has really shown those companies that embrace technology have been in a better position to deal with catastrophes such as the pandemic that we went through. And at the same time, it is challenging, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later. When talking about Gen AI, when you're talking to a mentee or a coachee, how do you help them navigate the challenge and the concerns they may have about it versus the opportunities that it also presents. So there are things that need to be worked out in each case, and at the same time provides tremendous opportunity. So I'll go into more detail in the upcoming section. So I look forward to sharing that with you. So thank you for those questions. I will go on now to just go in a little bit more depth about the AI impact that is highlighted in those particular reports. And what you'll see is in the Tech Vision 2023, the words that I thought really stood out from that is that these new foundation models, and the foundation models basically is text to describe huge amounts of data upon which the AI is pulling its insights and so on. they have an opportunity to transform that connection. They can improve our productivity significantly, even in very complex tasks. So where before the emphasis may have been on identifying, anything that looks yellow might be a lemon, or it could be the sun. How does it distinguish between the two? It's learning from loads of photographs and so on, and it's getting closer, and enabling, working with the human can enable us to solve complex tasks. And it's also opening up opportunities to build new solutions on top of the AI. So working alongside the AI models allows us to get even more effective solutions. For example, if you think about doctors or people in the healthcare industry, the experts on their own, they're super at diagnosing diseases and so on. And I forget the exact figures, but it was roughly around 8, they could diagnose correctly 88, 89% of the time on their own. The machine could diagnose a certain similar type of level, but if you put the human and the machine together, they were into the 96, 97%. So you can see the significant impact that can have. And with AI, what we're seeing now is that the opportunity to use the internet more effectively is becoming, there's a huge, much greater potential than used to be the case before to do so, to work with these models, to come up with greater insights, and so on. I don't know if some of you were watching an earlier speaker, Dr. Sinar, showing examples of, if you're a coach and you want to market your services, how can you do that using ChatGPT? And she walked through the different steps and so on. Great example of how we're changing our interaction with the internet. It's not just for me to find information, then go away and I'll think it through myself and come up with ideas. It is becoming increasingly a partner, like a coworker who I can bounce ideas off. Now, there are challenges at times. You need to be aware that it's not perfect. It doesn't always come up with the right answers. You still need to think through, okay, does that make sense? And if it refers to something, is there a genuine source, credible source that I can rely upon? And if so, then that's great. We're making great progress. The other thing that's interesting is that with the capabilities of this Gen AI, we now have an ability for a model to create its own data. So for example, how do you train an automatic vehicle not to crash into other vehicles around it? Well, you could say, give it bumpers and so on, or, how do you give it a circumstance, a child is crossing the road and there's another car that's nearby. How do you train it to do not knock down the child? Don't worry about the car bumping into the car next to you. It'll be fine. It's better that the car gets hit than the child gets hit. With these models, we now can create synthetic data, so allow the machines to create loads of scenarios of what could happen, what could go wrong, without having to learn from something that really did happen. Obviously feed in some of the real instances first, but then it can create its own models and allow that training to happen. And that is one example of what's being used in the automatic vehicle space. A huge opportunity, similarly also in healthcare and so on. So these are giving opportunities for the internet to be far more useful, and the tools based upon it to be far more valuable to us all as we use them. As I said, we've done a lot of work around embracing the Gen AI area, and as I was responding to you there earlier, Maria, the development of what's capable in Gen AI has come along over the last so many 20 years. Machine learning was literally about predicting and scenario planning and so on. Then we went into the more developed deep learning space, where it was identifying those pictures and images and listening to speech. Now we have the language mastery. Now we have the capability of talking to it in my own language, my own phrasing, and refining and having a conversation. So in other words, not just putting in a query and getting a response and then having to start fresh with a new query. You can actually say, remember that thing I told you, it's 3 steps above, can you further explore that point with me, etc. So there's a lot of different things that you can do in this space. And, you know, we see, as we look across the industry, approximately 40% of all of the work that we're looking at could be impacted by these new models, because roughly 65% of all work is language based and so on, and has the capability to be enhanced or augmented using these tools. So it's a huge opportunity. It is a challenge, of course, helping people to embrace new technology, and that is, you know, looking for something that we can help them as mentors and coaches. So there's a list in this particular piece, there's a list of different steps that people can follow if they're business leaders. So I'll leave it to you to explore further on what recommendations are provided here. So I will go on next to the insight that was gained from the life trends on how the prompts, you're moving from being informative to really having that intelligent component, from being transactional to being personal. So very much changing our relationship with the technology and allowing us a huge shift in ways of looking at the technology around us and how we can use it. And that ability to have conversational prompts and responses from the machine is highly valued, particularly for those in the age groups from around 18 to 35. They really see that as a huge step up, and a great opportunity for them to explore what they can do in this space. I don't know if many of you have teenage children, but those of you who do may have already found out the hard way as parents that your children have been using it for some time, since it became in the public domain back in November of last year. But they're using it to explore certain topics that they're using for school, helping them craft outlines for their essays. And then, as my own daughter pointed out to me, and then saying, now we'll do all that in Spanish. You know, so it's really another way of using it. And you see the younger generation, they are indeed embracing this early on, but they are also aware of some of the limitations of it. And one of the things that struck me as a researcher, I was contacted by some colleagues and said, can you get me the following reports? And I looked everywhere for those reports. Supposedly they were written by our company, but I couldn't find them. And I said, well, where did you get this list from? Oh, I got it from ChatGPT. Well, that's a perfect example of the machine hallucinating. In other words, making up something that sounded reasonable, that could have been written by us, with a title that was, you know, in the format in which we would normally do it, but it had never been published by us. So the more recent prompts that you can do will ask it, you know, did you make that up, or is the, you know, where might you point me to where I'll see if this piece actually exists. So it's interesting seeing the kind of interaction that you may end up having with the machine that allows that capability. So those are some of the insights from the reports that I shared with you. Now I want to jump into embracing change, because you brought up a very good question there earlier around how does it help, and how do we help people through this process? And you can, I obviously have created this slide with a slightly biased view, but I found it fascinating learning about the Luddites. I wasn't sure where that word had come from before, so I went into the history of it. You know, there were originally workers in England who destroyed the machinery that they felt was threatening their jobs. And so that word Luddite has become used as describing somebody who doesn't believe in technology, is opposed to it in general, and so on. In contrast, the technophiles are people who are seen as embracing technology. They see the opportunities it provides, but also the challenges that they need to be aware of to use it effectively. In my view, a true technophile is somebody also who not only embraces it, but ensures they've got the right training to use the technology, sets the guardrails on its deployment. If you were listening to the leaders of OpenAI, the company that came up with ChatGPT, they're all for regulation around AI. They're saying, you know, let's ensure that there's guardrails in place so that it is used correctly, efficiently, appropriately. So that was one of the things that really struck me as I looked at that. And so you know, this is what I thought was very important as we think about the elements here in this opportunity for our coachees and so on as we go forward. So if you think about it from your own position, what should your response be? As the title of our conference at the moment is around, you know, working in a space where there's a huge amount of uncertainty. How do you react? What do you do in place? If you think about technology as a whole, and I can understand absolutely concerns around, you know, how do we embrace it? What do we do? What's in place, etc. They all are very valid points, but at the same time, life is changing all the time. Technology is changing all the time. So we need to understand it at least to know when it's an opportunity, when it's a challenge, what do we need to do? What can we put in place to ensure it's effective and useful as opposed to being a threat, and looking at it from that perspective. And from that, I'd love to get some ideas or thoughts from you all on what you see as some technology that really has opened up new opportunities across the board. I picked some examples here, going from the computer chip, you know, to the mere fact, if you think of original computers years ago, they took up an entire room for something that's not even as capable as what we take for granted today in our cell phones. You know, the ability to shrink something down, to shrink the chip down to a tiny size that could then be embedded in every other machine that we use can have a huge impact in our lives. So give examples of solar energy. We can now capture that superb resource that we have in certain parts of the world with the sun and develop that and channel that into solar power. We have the opportunity to use augmented reality. Imagine what that a particular piece of furniture might look like in my living room. We can use the virtual reality to go into a space or think about the metaverse, where some companies are embracing that to do training in the metaverse, so you can meet avatars of yourself and others in your company, even though you're not able, you may be in a global company and unable to travel to all these places, but you can all meet together in the metaverse. And you know, these are fascinating changes and opportunities that come out of them through the technology. Any other ideas and so on that come out? I see there might be some in the chat. Anything else that come today? I see Christina. Would you want to share what you're thinking about in that point?
I would love that. Thank you very much, Ira. Much appreciated. No, I'm just thinking that I find myself a bit in this place where I need to understand the strategic value of these tools for my business before I actually choose what tool is there to amplify my business. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the greatest barriers in the faster adoption of the new tools is that managers just don't understand their businesses.
Yeah.
And they don't have the healthy habits of applying tools for strategic business leadership. Mm-hmm. You know, measuring performance, driving performance, focusing on objectives. I mean, we're struggling to have people use Slack. Okay. And we are rolling all of these tools onto them. I do believe that we are overestimating managers in general's technology intelligence. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And habits.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point. And one of the reasons why we at Accenture created TQ training, which it's technology quotient training, and brought this training across the board. So every single person at every single level within the organization has access to training and is highly encouraged to take the training, which it gives them exposure to, you know, what is the cloud? what is AI? You know, some of these key terms that are thrown around by many people who are, you know, very conversant in this technology, but who don't always explain in a simple and straightforward manner. Okay, what does that mean for me? How will I use this? What are the tools that will make my life easier? Or what are the tools that will help me better serve the end needs of my customer? And I think that's the thing that we as coaches and mentors always need to bear in mind. It's and you'll see I have a slide on it later, but I'll say it now anyway. The human element is so important, and recognizing that there's a resistance to change, a natural resistance that we all have to certain change. You know, I'm used to doing things my own way, a certain way, and it's effective, and I've always been good at that, and so on. Taking time out, a bit like taking that pause at the beginning of the day to do some mindfulness training, so on, just thinking of what the day will look like going forward. What are the challenges I'm likely to face? What are the things that I will find difficult? How might I make that better? If I want to connect with somebody, does it help if I go on a video call? If I want to communicate something really quickly and get their input fast, but I don't want to pick up the phone and so on because I don't want to interrupt their meeting, maybe I can just send a quick WhatsApp and it's a yes/no answer, and so on. There's a lot of technology out there that facilitates the life, but we also need to think about, okay, well, should I be allowing interruptions when somebody is presenting on a call? Should I allow my employees to be looking on in the internet and surfing all the time, looking up all the news that's happening throughout the day? Well, if they're journalists, then yes, they probably need that. They need to know what's the latest information that's coming online, and they need to be on top of it all the time. For people who are, you know, creative, coming up with new ideas and so on, maybe they need some away space, or maybe they need tools to help them be more creative. And you'll see, in fact, that's also where areas where the likes of Gen AI are starting to encroach on. They're coming up with their own images. You may have seen the picture of the Pope, the current Pope, but in a one of these white jackets geared for the snow. It was so incongruous. I remember seeing it, like, wow, where'd that come from? And of course, it was created. It wasn't a real photo. It was created by using these types of tools, meshed together. You'll hear also of deep fakes where somebody's voice, like my voice, could be simulated by the tool and made say other things that I would never say. Those things are, you know, both fun, exciting, so on, but also scary. I don't want to be held responsible for something I didn't say, or for people to think that I said something that I never say. So those are some of the guardrails that we're talking about that need to be put on technology, and maybe some of the reasons why people are holding back on embracing technology. So some of the concerns that struck me as I was thinking about it from an individual standpoint, and one of the reasons why you might see resistance in embracing this kind of change. Well, you know, will the robots or Gen AI be taking my job? And in our research, what we've seen is, yes, there are certain jobs that could be done solely by a robot or by Gen AI competitive tools. However, there's a wealth of jobs that can help enhance somebody. So in other words, an individual, like the medical example I gave earlier, working with this tool can give better diagnostics and so on, and can be even better performing in those roles. And we've, among the reports I shared with you, one of them, the one around generative AI, focuses on the different types of tasks and roles that can be augmented by these tools. So that's something that you can bear in mind as you're talking with mentees or coaches around this. How do I maintain my privacy and data security? That is a big concern for many of the leaders in this space, and many firms, you know, make it clear, you know, here's where you click, here's the privacy. There's a lot of details, you can go in. Some companies are very clear around, they want to protect their end user, and they say, look, we put on maximum privacy as a default. It's up to you if you want to turn it off. So these are some of the things that you can be aware of. The other thing I thought was interesting is around, is it legal for me to use Gen AI? Yeah, well, we can all access the site, we can type things in, but how about actually using it with clients and so on? Well, that's where you have to be cautious and careful. Well, if you're creating new content, all of the strikes that you'll have seen happening in the US around the writers' strikes, that's where the writers and actors have all been very concerned about people using Gen AI to say, write something in the style of so-and-so, and create an outline for a serial on the following topic. A machine can do that, but there's no human input, and so that's where the guardrails need to be put in place to ensure that the creativity and the respect for that property of the individual who took the time to create, it does stand out. Now, in some cases, some of the proposals that are being made are, let's flag this was done with the help of Gen AI, or this was done by me on my own. And so there are different ways that people will explore, and these are things you can be exploring with the people you're working with, because these are legitimate questions and concerns that they may have. And so what might they put in place? What guardrails do they want to apply in their usage or in your own individual usage of these tools that you're comfortable with? Because at the end of the day, you have to be comfortable with it, and clear on bringing the best result to your end customer and clients. So these are some of the questions that come to mind. Other things that you could ask and to help guide the individual to start embracing the change. How familiar are you? So the point that was brought up earlier around, well, many of the employees may not be familiar with these tools. That's where it's great to have training on, let's start from the basics. I'll assume you know nothing. Maybe you know a lot already, but let me start with assuming you know nothing so that everybody gets up to speed at the same level. Okay, so here's how a Zoom call works. And you go through the steps. So even in this process here, we have a great team who are hiding in the backgrounds, but they ensure that us as speakers are familiar with the tool, how it can work most effectively, and so on. That is all really helpful to get a better result out to the end customer and the end client. How can we all leverage this technology in our work? That's a question you can ask the individual and say, what are the challenges, pain points that you think that Gen AI may be able to help you with? And some of this, help me outline a pitch for a particular type of proposal, or I've written this text, can you help me make it more newsy? Or I'd love to have this published in the following magazine. I see that they have a certain style. Can you help me get closer to that style with my content? There are lots of different ways. Can you help me plan my calendar? What are the major threats or concerns in this industry? So if, as a mentor, you are working with somebody in an industry that you know nothing about, well, that's a great tool to say, okay, tell me what are the major trends or threats in the industry? What are the opportunities in the industry? At least you have a starting point to have a good discussion with your client about. So how might you transition into integrating Gen AI into your work? What are the guidelines you might put in place? What do you need to develop more knowledge, insights about? So, where do you need to get more training? These are questions that you can be asking the individual. And as a coach, obviously, you help them identify what it is they need to do next so that they're going to be well positioned going forwards. So, and then what steps can you take to ensure that the technology is integrated smoothly? Some of that is ensuring everybody is bought into it. For example, a company that says, okay, now we're all switching to, instead of Zoom, we're using another product. There's an up-ramp. There's a time for people to get familiar with the new product. Maybe it doesn't work the same way. They're not used to the layout, and that hesitation makes them look less sure of themselves when they're presenting, so on. Those are all reasons that an individual may be reluctant to transition. And so having that training and asking very simply, what might be holding you back? because sometimes the things that are holding you back are not necessarily what the decision makers or leaders had thought of in the first place. So that's something to look to the individual, not assume that you know what is holding them back in their case. Maybe they don't want to be seen silly in front of their grandkids or so on. I don't know about you, but when I type in my phone, I see my niece and nephew look at me and say, "Well, you do it so slowly. Why don't you go faster?" You know, my response to that: let me just talk to the machine and it can type for me. You know, so there are things that we can all do to you know, embrace the technology and use it for our purposes. And so that the other point I would leave with the individual with is, you know, what skills do they need to develop to be effective in their future role? And if you think about how the role of the individual, particularly knowing that technology can either automate or augment certain roles, not all of them, but certain ones. So what kind of skills, so on, should the individual start developing, and what can they be working on now so that they're better placed for that future? So these are some of the key questions that can be asked going forwards. And I want to just leave the discussion with a talk about transitioning to the world of human plus machine. And you know, how is the mentor landscape changing? And obviously, as we see all these changes going on around me, you know, the context I set earlier on is a huge amount of uncertainty in the world today. And there's also a huge amount of super innovation that's happening. How can we bring that to bear in our roles? And using this now consumer-ready version of Gen AI solutions, you know, is already being incorporated by students, as I mentioned earlier, in businesses who are actively looking to create their own models on top of the current models, so that they can control, for example, the data that it looks at, so they know that the quality data is being used, and so on. So there's a lot of different things coming up, and for us as mentors, navigating uncertainties is challenging, but it can turn into an opportunity if you know how to embrace the change. So it's helping identify what are the elements that are holding the individual back, that they can, you know, clarify, get more information on, etc. That will then allow them to think about the opportunities. And not all technology will be relevant, but some pieces of technology along the way, if you start adding them to your repertoire of what you can use and know when to use it and know when not to, that can make a significant difference and make somebody, particularly in this you know, certain times and constantly changing times, continues to make the individual relevant in the business world, in the business landscape, and as a result can be more effective going forward. And that's the thing that really, for me, stands out so much. You want to ensure that the people you're advising or coaching are aware of the changes that are happening in their industry, aware of how they can embrace them, what can make a difference for them, and how can they take advantage of that. And as I said, it also applies to us in our own roles as mentors, as coaches. How can we use these tools? I gave the example, if you're not familiar with an industry, you can ask it about the industry and the challenges that a leader in this industry or this particular role might be facing. Can help us develop our own marketing pitches around, how do we position the following types of content in a manner that somebody in this role will resonate for them, etc. There's a lot of different things that we can look at, as well as, for example, coming up with new picture ideas, created images that can be embedded in our marketing materials and so on. Those are only small examples, but there's tons more coming that will make a difference for us all. And so there was a great book that I really enjoyed and would like to highlight to you as well, called Human Plus Machine. It was actually published a few years ago, in fact, before the Gen AI ChatGPT consumer-ready version was launched, but it anticipated what was coming and talked about the different roles that this technology can bring. And one, it can amplify the data insights that we get from data. Two, it can interact with us as individuals, so that chat discussions that we were having now can make a difference. And three, it can embody. So think of a robot that has a ton of sensors and so on going around and collaborating with the human. For example, in things like earthquakes and so on, you can send the robots in and it can tell you, what I see here and so on, in a manner that wouldn't be safe for a human, but there's a lot more that can be done with that embodiment of that knowledge and so on. It can make a significant difference going forward. So that book will give you an insight as to how AI has developed over time and how to think about it, the positive impact that it has overall for us as individuals, and how you can bring that thinking to your role as a mentor. And so to wrap up, I would like to end with the point, the reminder is what I was saying earlier, is that mentoring is about the human element. We are mentoring individuals or teams. We're not mentoring a robot as of yet. So that human element, that natural reaction, energy, questioning, challenging, reluctance, or embracing, all of those are human reactions to some change. And we as mentors and coaches can help them with that. And a first step, from my view, is help them be informed. And then once you're better informed, you're in a better position to make decisions around what is possible, what is relevant, how to integrate this into our work, and what will make a difference and ultimately make a more positive impact for the individual, both in terms of their professional accomplishment, but also their personal, how they feel about it. That the one thing that we all want as humans is to be agents in our own change, to have that element of agency, to be in charge, be in control, so that knowing or understanding what's happening in the world and how it might be applied to enhance our work can make a significant difference. So let me stop there and look to you all for comments, reactions, questions. We have just a few more minutes in the chat, so open up the mics. Feel free to jump in. So I think you're on mute still at the moment, so feel free to open up. So I will stop there. That's my last slide. But as I said, I have a supporting document which gives you the links to the reports that I shared, plus the full name of the book that I referenced there as well. Any comments, any reactions? Is that in line? Are you finding many of your clients? Mick, go ahead. I see your hand up.
So I was going to ask a question to maybe everybody on the call. So is anybody actually using Gen AI in their daily life at the moment? No? Yeah. Sinar? Yeah. Isa? Nobody else? Okay. So it's kind of interesting, we're all here talking about AI stuff and that, and most people aren't using it in that. So, so Samira is using it as well, maybe. But there's a huge amount of potential for it. For anyone who's coaching, mentoring, they're probably offering some training. They may be writing stuff on LinkedIn. They're sharing their knowledge and experience in that. So it can be a great tool for that, with a little bit of care to make sure you're not just, churning out some stuff that doesn't make any sense with hallucinations. But there are ways to kind of enhance the way you work using AI.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I would say that one of the things that we're encouraging mostly in our own organization is greater access. And encouraging people to use it more effectively, use it more frequently, and so on. So that is one of the things that as a team leader, I'm also doing that, and as a coach and so on, I'm looking to encourage people to embrace this opportunity. It is new, it's different, it's exciting. There's a great potential to it, and if we embrace it ourselves, we can better understand it and help apply it for our mentees and coaches. And I see we're just coming over time, so I don't know if we're just going to be kicked out. Perhaps Carolina can tell us. But thank you all for your participation and great questions and comments.
Thank you, Shira. Thank you all.
You, Shira.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.